She thought she had everything figured out until love forced her to choose between comfort and true happiness. Her world turns upside down when she finds herself torn between two men, one who never valued her and another who sees her like no one ever has. But before she can decide her fate, a shocking secret, a bitter mother, and a life-threatening accident threaten to destroy everything. Will she fight for the love she deserves or remain trapped in the chains of her past? Get ready for a roller coaster of emotions. This is one story you won't forget. Hi friends and family. Welcome to another fascinating movie journey with us. Get ready as we delve into this very interesting Nollywood movie filled with hidden morals and exciting lessons that we're going to uncover today. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned and enjoy the ride with us. Let's get started. One fateful night, a young, beautiful child, Nwella, was busy reading a romantic novel when her father, Olumide, entered her room. She quickly hid the novel under her duvet and picked up her schoolbook, pretending to read. However, Olumide wasn't convinced. He lifted the duvet, found the novel, and realized it was rated PG-16. Nwella was just 11 years old, too young to be reading such a book. As they both struggled over the novel, the power suddenly went out. The next morning, Olumide went to speak with the estate representative about the power outage from the previous night. While there, he witnessed the estate rep speaking rudely to an elderly woman. Seriously? He dares to talk to my mom in such a manner? Olumide immediately confronted the estate rep and demanded that he apologize to the elderly woman. When the estate rep refused and tried to walk away, Olumide seized him, twisting his arm behind his back. Only then did the estate rep apologize, and Olumide walked away. Interesting. The following day, while Olumide was driving Nwella to school, his car almost had a head-on collision with another vehicle. The driver, Son, stepped out and an argument ensued. However, Olumide held back because Nwella was in the car. Son's girlfriend, Lillian, quickly intervened, begging Son to return to the car so they could be on their way. Olumide then got back into his car and drove off. Guys, who do you think was wrong in this situation? Olumide or Son? Please drop your answers in the comments below. Later that day, Lillian was at home with Son when she told him he shouldn't have reacted the way he did. However, Son, being arrogant, refused to listen. Lillian kept her cool. Just then, Lillian's mother came downstairs and joined them in the living room. She shared the ordeal of what had happened earlier that day and how Olumide had saved her from the rude estate rep. She then told Son that she had prepared lunch and wanted him to eat with them, proceeding to set the table. The next morning, Nwella stood outside the apartment with a frown on her face. Olumide approached her and apologized, assuring her he never meant to fight the previous day. While they were talking, Lillian's mother stepped out of her apartment and was shocked to see that Olumide was her neighbor. She playfully hailed him, calling him Mike Tyson. Nwella frowned and started whispering the name Lillian's mother had called Olumide. Pretending not to know what she meant, Olumide brushed it off and they got into the car together. Later that day, Lillian's mother was humming a song while preparing a flask of food for Olumide and Nwella. She told Lillian about her plan. At first, Lillian wasn't entirely comfortable with it, but she eventually told her mother to do whatever made her happy. Guys, are you thinking what I'm thinking? If you are, please share your thoughts in the comments section. Lillian's mother then went over to Olumide's apartment and rang the doorbell. Nwella checked who it was but refused to open the door. Instead, she went back to watching the movie on TV. The doorbell continued ringing until Olumide finally came downstairs to open it. After exchanging greetings, Lillian's mother handed him the flask of food and then mentioned that she wanted his wife to taste it. There was an awkward silence before Olumide gently informed her that his wife had passed away. Shocked, she quickly apologized and left his apartment. Later in their apartment, Lillian's mother started sobbing. Concerned, Lillian asked her what was wrong. Lillian's mother then explained that she had just found out Nwella's mother was late when she went to give them food. Lillian, already feeling sad for Nwella, asked if she had recently lost her mother. However, her mother told her that it had happened a long time ago. At that, Lillian felt relieved, realizing that her mother was exaggerating and being dramatic as usual. The next day, Olumide came to return the flask Lillian's mother had used to bring them food. Lillian, who had just come downstairs, greeted Olumide and Nwella before rushing out. Nuella was starstruck upon realizing that Lillian, her favorite romantic novelist, was actually her neighbor. She was overjoyed. Once outside, Nuella eagerly begged Olumide to help her get Lillian's latest novel. However, Olumide refused, reminding her that she could only read such books when she turned 16. With that, they left for school. Later that day, Lillian went to Soon's place, planning to stay for the weekend. However, Soon was visibly displeased to see her and said some hurtful words. Lillian was stunned and heartbroken. Unable to stay, she left and returned home. When she arrived, her mother was surprised to see her back so soon. Lillian then explained how Soon had treated her, but instead of sympathizing, her mother blamed her. She even suggested that Soon's behavior was probably why he hadn't proposed yet. Lillian couldn't believe what she was hearing and angrily stormed off to her room. Seriously, guys, no lady should be treated this way. She deserves to be cherished and adored like a queen. The next day, Nuella stepped outside and peeped toward Lillian's window. Just then, Lillian's mother spotted her. She first asked about Olumide before inviting Nuella inside. Once inside, Lillian's mother offered Nuella some refreshments. Not long after, Lillian came downstairs to join them. However, their little gathering was suddenly interrupted when Olumide stormed into Lillian's apartment, looking visibly angry at both Lillian's mother and Nuella. Without a word, he took Nuella home. Back at their apartment, Olumide, still fuming, scolded Nuella and told her she was grounded. Nuella started begging him, but in his frustration, he said some hurtful words. Heartbroken, she ran to her room. The next morning, Olumide went to apologize to Lillian's mother for how he had spoken to her the previous day. She assured him that she understood. Just then, Lillian came downstairs looking worried. She had an important meeting on the mainland, but all the Uber drivers were refusing to take her. Seeing her distress, Olumide, who was also heading to the mainland for a meeting, offered to give her a ride. Wow, that's so thoughtful. You can just feel the relief through your screen. On their way to the mainland, Lillian apologized on behalf of both Soon and her mother. However, Olumide, being a straightforward person, felt she was just making excuses for Soon's rude and arrogant behavior. Lillian, on the other hand, didn't see it that way. As they drove, they had deep conversations, and by the end of the trip, they had become friends. The next day, Soon came to see Lillian at her apartment. While they were in the sitting room, he tried to make love to her, but Lillian wasn't feeling it. She reminded him that her mother could walk in at any moment and that it would be disrespectful for her to find them in such a situation. However, Soon resorted to emotional blackmail, using vulgar words to guilt trip her. Frustrated, he eventually stood up and left. Seriously, guys, Lillian is really enduring a lot from Soon. Can you imagine how disrespectful that is? Later, Lillian went to join her mother in the kitchen. Her mother asked why she hadn't gone out with Soon, and Lillian, unwilling to explain the real situation, lied that Soon had something important to do. Then, to distract herself, she started having fun in the kitchen with her mother and Nuella. That evening, Olumide came over for dinner with Lillian and her mother. After dinner, he tried to assist Lillian with the dishes, but she insisted on doing it alone. Later, they started discussing Lillian's books, and Olumide mentioned how engrossed Nuella was with them. He also told Lillian that he would have to vet her books before allowing Nuella to read them. The next day, Olumide started reading one of Lillian's top novels and quickly became engrossed in it. Later that evening, he was outside waiting when Lillian arrived in an Uber. The moment she stepped out, Olumide eagerly asked her a question about a character in her book. Lillian was surprised. She hadn't expected Olumide to be reading her novel. The following day, which was the weekend, Olumide and Nuella visited Lillian in her study. Nuella, being playful, snitched on Olumide, telling Lillian how he couldn't stop talking about her and her books. Lillian's mother soon came out of her room, and Nuella left with her, leaving Lillian and Olumide alone. They spent some time together talking when, suddenly, Soon barged in unexpectedly. His tone was rude as he spoke to Olumide, but Olumide chose not to retaliate. Instead, he left peacefully. Soon then turned to Lillian and warned her to stay away from Olumide. Seriously, guys, who does this man think he is? This attitude of his will cost him a huge favor. Don't you think so? Later in the evening, Lillian brought Nuella back to Olumide's apartment. Excited, NWOSU began sharing stories about the fun adventure she had with Lillian's mother earlier that day. Once NWOSU went to her room, Lillian took a moment to compliment Olumide's apartment and also apologized for the way Son had spoken to him. Olumide, however, questioned how she managed to put up with Son's arrogance. Lillian couldn't find the words to respond and quietly left for her apartment. The next day, Lillian excitedly walked into Son's bedroom, eager to share some great news. She had been nominated for Best Author. But instead of celebrating with her, Son belittled her achievement, talking down on it as if it were insignificant. Lillian was deeply hurt. Without another word, she left his house. Imagine such rudeness. But as soon as she arrived home, she was greeted with a surprise celebration from her mother, Olumide, and NWOSU. They had planned a small party in honor of her nomination. Overwhelmed with happiness, Lillian finally felt appreciated. At least she had people who truly celebrated her wins. Feeling grateful, Lillian extended an invitation to both Olumide and NWOSU to attend the nomination event with her. Later that night, unable to contain her excitement, Lillian showed up at Olumide's apartment with a bottle of wine. She confessed that she couldn't sleep because she was still too thrilled about the nomination. Olumide simply smiled and told her to relax. As they talked, NWOSU suddenly came downstairs looking for Olumide. He gently instructed her to go back to her room. Now, this is the definition of a real man. What do you guys think? Drop your answers below. In another scene, Olumide was struggling to style NWOSU's hair when Lillian walked in. Amused, she stepped in to help, carefully fixing NWOSU's hair. Before leaving, she gifted NWOSU a beautiful necklace. Wow, a mother-daughter bond is definitely forming here. Later that night, after returning from the event, Olumide once again congratulated Lillian on winning Best Author. Lillian, feeling deeply grateful, thanked him for his support. Olumide then carried a sleeping NWOSU inside the apartment. Afterward, he and Lillian sat together, sharing a bottle of wine. As they talked, their connection deepened. Then, in a tender moment, Olumide held Lillian's hand and confessed his feelings for her. Without hesitation, they shared a kiss. But suddenly, Lillian withdrew. Without saying a word, she stood up and left his apartment. This is one of the best moments ever. But how will Son react when he finds out his woman is getting close to another man? Will Lillian finally find peace, or will she end her connection with Olumide and fight to keep her relationship with Son intact? Let's keep watching. The next morning, Lillian and her mother greeted each other with a warm hug. However, her mother was surprised to see her home, assuming she would be with Son, celebrating her award. Lillian, however, remained indifferent and casually responded that Son hadn't even called to congratulate her. Making excuses for him, she claimed he was probably busy with work. Just then, Olumide called, but Lillian hesitated to pick up. She was still avoiding him because of what had happened the previous night. Noticing this, her mother took the phone from her and answered it herself. The following day, as Olumide returned from picking NWOSU up from school, they spotted Lillian emptying the trash outside. NWOSU excitedly greeted her, but Lillian only responded casually, refusing to acknowledge Olumide's presence. She then walked straight into her apartment. NWOSU, feeling confused, begged her father to let her visit Aunt Lillian, but Olumide, noticing Lillian's strange behavior, told her she could go later in the day. Later that evening, Olumide went over to Lillian's apartment and knocked. When she finally stepped outside, he directly asked her why she had been avoiding him. Lillian hesitated before bringing up the kiss they shared. But before she could finish, Olumide cut her off. "It wasn't a mistake," he said firmly. "I don't regret it because it felt real." Someone's love story is about to begin. "I can feel the butterflies, guys." Lillian, trying to stay rational, reminded him that she was in a 5-year relationship with Son and that at any moment, Son could propose. She didn't want to jeopardize that, but Olumide wasn't backing down. He looked at her intently and told her how he truly felt. He was certain their connection was mutual. He leaned in again, trying to kiss her, but this time, Lillian quickly withdrew and hurried back into her apartment. The next day, Lillian visited Son, looking lost in thought. Meanwhile, Son was in high spirits, rambling about an investment opportunity and how much profit he expected to gain. Then, without hesitation, he asked Lillian to give him 5 million naira to invest. Lillian refused. Son's mood immediately shifted. He began talking down to her again, belittling her, just as he always did. But this time, Lillian had had enough. "I don't like the way you talk to me," she said firmly. Son scoffed, but Lillian didn't stop there. She told him how he had never valued or respected her, how he had constantly dismissed her achievements, and how she was done tolerating it. And with that, she ended the relationship. Son, being the narcissist he was, sneered at her. "No man will ever take you seriously," he spat. Lillian ignored him and walked out. Later that day, she went to Olumide's apartment and told him everything. "I've left soon for good," she admitted. "I can't believe I spent 5 years with someone who never valued or respected me." Olumide gently consoled her, offering words of encouragement and reassurance. The next day, all hell broke loose. When Lillian told her mother she had broken up with Son, her mother was beyond furious. But as Lillian opened up about how emotionally abusive Son had been, her mother began to realize just how much her daughter had endured. A few days later, Lillian and Olumide had just stepped out of the car at Lillian's apartment when Son arrived, driving like someone with diarrhea. He stormed out and confronted Olumide, threatening him to stay away from Lillian. But this time, Lillian wasn't backing down. "I'm not your woman, Son," she said, standing her ground. Their heated voices caught the attention of Lillian's mother, who stepped outside to see what was happening. Soon, desperate and bitter, turned to Lillian's mother. "So you know your daughter is frolicking with Olumide?" he sneered. "She's dating him." That was how Lillian's mother found out about her daughter's involvement with Olumide, and she was shocked. Soon, still seething, stormed off, got into his car, and sped away. Back at her apartment, Lillian's mother erupted. "How could you date a single father?" she shouted. "I don't want my grandchildren being called stepchildren." Lillian was taken aback. That was her mother's issue? Her mother went on to reveal that she had suffered a lot because of her own step-siblings and still hadn't healed from the pain. But is that really the issue here, guys? Or is this just an excuse? From that moment on, Grandma started avoiding Nuella whenever she came around. The tension in the air was thick. Things were about to get even more complicated. Olumide came back from work and saw Nuella sitting outside. She told him that Lillian's mother had refused to speak with her. The next evening, Olumide and Lillian returned from a date when Lillian's mother arrived, preventing Olumide from entering the apartment with Lillian. She also informed Lillian that she had invited Son over for dinner so they could resolve their issues. Lillian was not happy about it. Thinking out loud, guys, isn't the goal of every relationship to stay where you're valued and have peace? Why then is Grandma trying to force a failing relationship on Lillian? The next day, Olumide and Lillian spent time together in his apartment, where they shared a kiss. Later in the evening, Lillian read Nuella a bedtime story, and Olumide joined them. The following day, Olumide picked up a package for Nuella, and she told him it was a gift for Lillian's mother, Lillian, and herself. Later that night, Lillian and her mother were arguing outside the apartment when Nuella overheard their conversation. Shocked by the hurtful words Lillian's mother said about her, Nuella couldn't believe what she was hearing. In distress, she shouted, "Grandma!" and ran straight into the path of a speeding car. At the hospital, Lillian was stunned to learn that Nuella was not Olumide's biological child when the doctor asked to see Nuella's parents. Surprised, right? Well, let's keep rolling. A few days later, in the evening, Lillian went to check on Nuella, but Olumide did not allow her in. He told her they needed time to heal, so Lillian returned to her apartment. The next day, after realizing her mistakes, Lillian's mother apologized to Lillian for the hurtful words she had said about Nuella. But Lillian, still upset, told her mother that if anything happened to Nuella, she would have to leave her apartment. She then walked away, leaving her mother in tears. The following day, when Olumide came to give Nuella her medication, Nuella asked about Lillian. Olumide reassured her that Lillian had been checking on her, but that he was following the doctor's instructions to let her rest. Later that day, Lillian visited Olumide, and he asked about her mother. Lillian told him how miserable her mother had been since the incident, and apologized for what her mother had said. Olumide then opened up about his past, revealing that he used to be a tout and that his family had turned their backs on him, except for his twin sister and her husband, who were Nuella's parents. He shared how he had turned over a new leaf to take care of Nuella. He then recalled the heartbreaking moment when he received a call informing him that his sister had been involved in an accident. Lillian consoled him. A few days later, Olumide and Lillian took Nuella to the supermarket to buy groceries, where they unexpectedly ran into Sohn. As expected, Sohn, being the petty person that he was, started insulting Olumide. Sensing trouble, Lillian immediately took Nuella outside. The moment Lillian left, Olumide finally gave Sohn the beating he had long deserved since their first altercation. Nice one. At least someone has finally been put in his place. Later at home, Olumide went into Nuella's room to apologize for fighting, and she was with Lillian. Nuella then told Olumide that Lillian had made her understand that sometimes a man has to stand up to defend his loved ones against bullies. They all laughed about it and hugged. The next day, Nuella went to Lillian's apartment but hesitated at the door, unsure whether to knock. Just as she was about to leave, Grandma stepped outside. Without thinking twice, Nuella ran to her and hugged her. Overcome with guilt, Lillian's mother apologized to Nuella for the things she had said. She then also apologized to Olumide, and he forgave her. They all hugged, finally putting the past behind them. A few days later, Lillian's mother and Olumide were at the dining table, waiting for dinner to be served, when Olumide told her that he wanted to propose to Lillian. Overjoyed, Lillian's mother gave him her blessings. Olumide asked her not to tell Lillian, but she could barely contain her excitement. And that's it, guys. Thank you for joining us in this very exciting episode. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notification bell for more interesting and fascinating episodes like this. Till we meet again, goodbye.